Turnover or Activity Analysis, Part 5. Asset Turnover and Asset Turnover Ratio. This is one of the activity or turnover ratio that we have discussed earlier too. But this ratio is a bit different from the turnover ratios that we have discussed earlier. This ratio is a relationship of sales and total assets. As we know that the assets in an organization are basically there to generate sales. And if assets are used more effectively, more sales are likely to be generated. So we also take it in the angle that it is the capital which is invested in the business. And this capital comprises of both debt and equity capital, and the sum of which is equal to the total assets. So when we use the term total assets, we also mean that it is the total capital which is employed in the business. The most effective use of that capital will generate the highest level of sales or revenue, which is ultimately then translated into net income or profit. So we calculate this ratio in terms of times. That is, how many times the assets are converted into sales. Like if our answer is 1.5, that means the sales or the revenue is 1.5 times of our assets. Now, this ratio actually shows that how effectively the management of a company are using their assets to generate sales. And of course, because the assets control is in the hand of management, so it shows their performance. To calculate this ratio, we take the data from profit and loss account as well as the balance sheet, because the sales or the revenue figure is taken from the profit and loss account, which is the income statement, and the value of total capital or the total assets is then taken from the balance sheet. This ratio can be benchmarked in different ways. As we have discussed earlier also, a good benchmarking is comparing a ratio with the other companies operating in the same sector. यानी एक इंडस्ट्री के अंदर जो दूसरी कंपनीज काम कर रही हैं, ऑपरेट कर रही हैं, उनके साथ हम इस रेशो को कंपेयर करके ये फैसला कर सकते हैं कि क्या मैनेजमेंट इस कंपनी की अपने एसेट्स को इफेक्टिवली यूज़ कर रही है या नहीं, और ये इफेक्टिवनेस सेल्स जनरेट करने में है. आगे चल के हम दूसरी रेशोज़ में भी देखेंगे कि किस तरीके से मैनेजमेंट की एफिशिएंसी और इफेक्टिवनेस को मेजर किया जाता है. ये रेशो किसके लिए इम्पॉर्टेंट है? फॉर whom it is important? Certainly, higher level of sales or revenue is likely to be converted into more profit. So anybody, any stakeholder who is somewhat concerned with the profits is concerned with this ratio. But if you look at it from the viewpoint of the management of a company, certainly they are the people who are generating sales using these assets. So their performance is reflected in this ratio. So they are the ones who are most concerned about this ratio. This is the formula of asset turnover ratio, where we take the annual sales and we take the figure of total assets. And when we divide the annual sales with the total assets, we get asset turnover ratio. If we take some example, some figure, let's say as it is there in this slide, if our sales amount is 1 million rupees and the value of our total assets is 750,000, which means that our sales have exceeded the value of our assets, and it is more than the value of our assets. As a rule of thumb, we may say that if the sales goes higher than the value of our assets, we say that this ratio is good. But as we have just discussed, the benchmarking is most suitable if we compare the ratio with the average of the industry or the other companies operating in the same industry. So in this case, this ratio comes out to be 1.33 times. That means our sales is 1.33 times of our assets. We may put it in some other words by saying that our revenue or sale is 133% of our assets. That won't be incorrect too. Turnover, asset turnover ratio should be compared with the performance of the company in the past years. Like if we want to see whether this year's asset turnover is better or not, we may also compare it with the last year's asset turnover. Should it be more or less? That is another very pertinent question. क्या इस रेशो को ज़्यादा होना चाहिए या कम होना चाहिए? जैसे अभी हमने बात की कि इस रेशो का ज़्यादा होना मैनेजमेंट की बेहतर परफॉर्मेंस को रिफ्लेक्ट करता है और इसका ज़्यादा इम्कान है कि ये रेशो जितनी ज़्यादा होगी प्रॉफिट भी उतना ज़्यादा होगा. So this is the case that the ratio should be more as much as possible. Comparison with the industry, comparison with other industries is also one way of seeing whether the ratio is good or not. When a shareholder invests some amount in a business or in a company, the purpose is to make profit. Of course, the people who have got money, who want to invest money, they are not very much concerned whether they are getting this profit from a textile mill or they are getting it from a cement manufacturing company. But their issue is that they are getting more profit or not. So it is fair that we compare this ratio with some other industries also and see that the ratio of this company is more or less than the average turnover ratio of the whole of the sectors operating in an economy. So comparing with the same industry, comparing with the other sectors or industry, and comparing with the past results. So if we are performing better and the ratio is higher than the ratio which was there in the last year or previous years, we can say that it is improving and it is better. So the effectiveness of management is reflected through this ratio, and hence this ratio is most important for the management of a company, but certainly it is important for all the stakeholders, particularly the shareholders, and also the banks or the lenders.